The miracle in A Course in Miracles being corrected perception, which means a correction in understanding and orientation in vantage point, to go specifically from a condition of mindlessness to mindfulness. So much it appears there's a world out there. When it's actually an internal process of brain functioning, it's all in our head. And as with dreams, every character isn't independent but an orchestration of the sleeping dreamer. So too is the world but imaginings of thought and wishes within the mind. So now again, the mind is not temporal, it doesn't have substance, it's outside of time and space. Just as we can't see infrared and ultraviolet or micro and radio waves, the body was designed not to be able to see mind. If we could see the mind, this would all be very simple. We could see the vantage point from the puppeteer and the puppets. We would see a child animating toys and understanding how the whole thing works, and it would make sense. But we've tremendous resistance to learning that. So the Course provides many tools to help us learn, and among the most powerful in helping us correct our misunderstanding, our misperception, our misorientation, our mindlessness, are the concepts of cause and effect and form and content. And just for a quick review again, non-duality is God, the mind of God, the state of peace. We reject that. We imagine a separated state. And here again, it's interesting because non-duality, what does non-duality do? It merely extends itself. Everything is just non-duality. Duality, on the other hand, constantly separates. It just keeps dividing and subdividing, and certainly this world, this universe, is a great depiction of that. But we imagine there to be an alternative to non-duality. There is the tiny mad idea of duality to give it substance, because it really, in fact, is impossible and nothing, but to give it some sense of real. We conjecture this idea of guilt, that I really have pulled off the impossible, that I have by virtue of the fact of establishing duality. I've destroyed non-duality. I'm guilty of that. The experience of guilt becomes fear, so we're able to split off guilt and the experience of fear, and that conveniently then becomes the basis for a dream world. And also by design, the dream world is necessary to effectively be able to deal with the shame by this game of shame and blame. So what appears to be a physical world, this universe that we live in, is really, as I mentioned before, the dream state, a child animating toys. So it all takes place just as our world does in our brain. The world actually is just a symbolic representation of the ideas of the mind. So that's the importance of learning what cause and effect and content and form are as a part of the correcting of our perception, a part of the miracle. So when we think about ourselves in this world, again, we don't see mind, we don't consider mind, and to understand then that this is form. Our physical world is a world of form, and the form is designed to distract from the content. As the Course says, nothing so blinding as perception of form. So, and this is the magic trick. It's the state, look at this and not at this. Want to focus in on what goes on in the world and not see the mind that is orchestrating all of this. So, again, form and the content. The helpful process of using the world is to understand that it merely shows one the content of their mind. So my experience, all that my experience can helpfully do is to reveal the content of my mind and help me go from a state of mindlessness in form to a state of mindfulness, understanding the content of that form. So that's one part, the content and the form. The other part that's probably the most powerful teaching tool is to correct what we think of as cause and effect. Now, our daily experience is that we think that everything in this world is causal. And what the Course is saying is that it's not. Everything in this world, everything in a dream is effect. As much as we think that when we have dreams at night that the figures in our dreams, the events in our dreams actually have an impact on us, we're making those up. They come from our own wishes, our own thoughts, our own fabrication. So the world does the same thing. Nothing in the world is causal. It merely acts out. It merely illustrates and depicts what goes on on the level of abstract mind. So again, just to remember that mind is not temporal. It's outside of time and space. There is one mind that has the dream of the world, of which each of us are dream characters. So it's very difficult to think that traffic doesn't upset me, that having a rough day at work, disagreeing with people is not the cause of my upset, even that cancer, the death or illness of a loved one is not the cause of my upset. Wars and famine are not the cause of my upset. And on the other side of the coin, that to go to movies for me and have fun is not really the cause of my peace and joy. Again, nothing in this world is causal, as convincing though as we've designed it to seem to be, and developed courses of study, science, economy, politics, self-help with relationships, all to seem to have the intent of mastering things in the world, because we have projected onto those causal power for the sake of playing the shame and blame game. As we've talked about before, the state of mind, able to make it seem as if it has separated from non-duality, as if it has established its own substitute reality. It requires that distinction from peace, from love, from wholeness. And so what we have in the mind is this state of upset, of guilt, of fear, that experience of shame. And in order to deal with that, rather than letting it go and letting go of, in essence, one's sense of separated self, letting go of duality, what we do is the shame and blame, and the world was made then to play that off. Now, to give another example of cause and effect, again, Jesus' life as a body and then Jesus as the mind, help us understand that, and by virtue of the fact that it's a extreme contrast. So that, and in the Course, Jesus talks about this, where his crucifixion as a body was for him a walk in the park. It didn't have all the horrors, all the story of sacrifice, all the divisions of enemies and the good players and the bad players. For Jesus, it didn't have that. It's not so much the question of what would Jesus do, but what did Jesus know? And as a body, again, just a projection of an idea in the mind. So one of the ideas in the mind, of course, is that idea of healing. And what it does allow us then is to change the intent of relationship, which, remember, the whole reason for the world coming into seemingly being, having that dream in the mind, was to serve the purpose of shame and blame in the pursuit of specialness, as we've talked about before, that I want to preserve some sense of significance and importance for myself, that by definition necessitates the experience of guilt, the experience of shame, and then what do I do with that? I shame and blame. So the world, all of our relationships were really set up to merely project out shame onto blame. Shame becomes tolerable if I have something to blame. So Jesus knew that. In his crucifixion story, it was almost as if he was saying, all right, let's do the most horrifying things we can think of on the level of form, which would be torture and death and psychological accusation, abandonment, and all those things that we worry about on a day-to-day basis, magnified to their largest extent. So Jesus was in essence saying, let's do that, and I'll show you that it really means nothing. It has no power other than what we give it. So again, it's not what Jesus did so much as what Jesus knew. And while there was the Jesus, the body, Jesus knew that the mind, on the level of mind, everything was manufactured as a dream. So Jesus, the person, would understand then that to be on the level of mind is to be Jesus, the person being crucified, it's the Roman soldiers, it's the Pharisees and the Sadducees, it's the crowds, it's the people who wept and cared about him, and the people that spit upon him, that all of that was simply manufactured by the mind. So one can't very well say then that I'm Jesus and not the rest, or I'm the Romans and not the rest. And that's the difficulty of changing, correcting our perception from an individual dream character that we believe to be ourself, this person body, and going back to where that really comes from is just a character who is orchestrated among many for the purpose of shame and blame on the level of mind. So you can again appreciate too our resistance to this, because in the level of the world, we do feel as if things make us happy and sad and angry and afraid, that they do cause our experience to be what it is. When in fact the Course is teaching, no, this is all effect. There is nothing ever on the level of the world, on the level of form, that can make experience. It is simply a decision on the level of that abstract, non-temporal mind. Much as in a dream, nothing in the dream impacts one. You wake up from the dream and you were just as before you went to sleep. So the whole process then of the Course is to awaken, is to go from this state of mindlessness, thinking oneself to be a dream character, for the purpose of being able to act out shame and blame, and then remembering where it all comes from, and then being able to really reevaluate, is this what I want? The Course in a lot of ways is the difficulty is that if we're to follow this process of unlearning, forgiveness, correcting our perception, what it means is to take that shame and blame, understand how we assign it in our day-to-day routines, and then to say, I want to no longer do that. I'm willing to let go of that strategy. So in that moment, then the world offers a chance to look in the mirror and to see the content of mind and really understand that. But you can really begin to see the power of the strategy, incredible strategy of the ego thought system in making form, to hide content, to make bodies, to hide mind, to separate us so that we seem to be individuals among many rather than one singular dreamer. The difficulty is that as I look at that, my option is to no longer blame, to begin to understand that all the things that I think upset me, in fact, don't upset me. And conversely, on the other side of the coin, all the things that make me happy are really not things that make me happy. And to understand that the world does nothing towards that. That all comes from the level of the mind. So you can really rearrange your relationships, try different relationships, and try different jobs. And that's not to say that one shouldn't do that. What we do need to do is have a series of gentler dreams. The idea of awakening is so terrifying that what we want to do is move through a series of more gentler dreams to help us remind what is really going on, but to not give it up all at one time, which would be far too terrifying. So in essence, what the Course does, what Jesus does, is to use our investment in specialness and say, okay, let's start there and we'll work through it. So the difficulty then is if I start to understand that nothing in my world does anything to me on the level of true experience, and true experience being simply that there's an experience of guilt, fear, terror, shame, or there's an experience of peace, which is a reflection, which is kind of a redirecting back to the memory of what reality and truth really are. So what I have to do at some point is understand that all these things that I'm attributing to the world are not true, and that then if I stop the blame portion of the strategy, what I'm stuck with is the shame. And that's not comfortable. That's why the world and relationships came into being, as a way to deal with that shame. So to sit with that shame is incredibly difficult, and that's where in the Course Jesus instructs to ask for help. And what I'm really asking for help is, if I have that willingness, is to remember truth. And so it's reintegrating in my split self to go from the guilt and fear experience to understanding the nothingness that I've really made them up. So the difficulty is to stop the blame, to sit with the experience of shame, to know that there's nothing, to not fall into the temptation that there's something in the world that will make that better, that will change that I can pull that off, but to truly understand that the whole world, the basis of it being, was to serve the strategy of shame and blame. So if I'm really willing then to understand that there is nothing in this world that will make me happy, there is nothing in this world that can be made peaceful, then, and it's simply the state of mind, so then I can kind of not be distracted by the world, sit with the shame, and at that moment, then I can really see how awful that choice to make separation seem real is. And at that point, then I have the option to make an alternate choice, which would be to simply say, this is really silly, it's not in my best interest, and I have no interest in it, and so therefore I let it go, and having then a clear mind, I can remember the truth of who I am and where I come from, which is the peace. What I have to let go of, however, is that idea of separation. And as we've talked about previously, that the separation requires the experience of horror to make it seemingly real for us, and then that precipitates the shame and blame. So, what the Course is helping us do is to make that correction, to understand what the world is, who we think we are as a person in the body in the world, to understand what mind is, to understand mind as causal agent, and the cause is simply to make that experience of specialness real by interjecting this experience of guilt to block out the memory of truth, but then all the problems that are precipitated in doing that. But to recognize ultimately that it is a wish, it is a thought, and it is not real. Now one can't just make the jump and to go into one's life and say, oh, these things aren't real. That in many ways is just another level of denial. So what we really want to pay attention to is how difficult our day-to-day life is, and that we do think by rearranging the pieces we can establish a different experience, when in fact what we're left with is that the only experience of being a separated being is that of horror and shame. And the nice thing about it is that that level we can understand that it's a fabrication and say that I really don't want that, and then return to home. And that would be the miracle, is that whole process of correcting our orientation, our vantage point, our understanding of who we are, and then reestablishing our experience, our remembering what truth is. So.